Hello everyone, welcome to the channel of MeteoMark Weather. It's great to have you here with me again. We have coverage. This is special coverage on Tropical Storm Rafael. It is set to become a hurricane, and it could become a Category 2 hurricane over the next 24 to 48 hours here. So we're going to get into the details and where is this storm going? We know it's going to impact Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Cuba. Where does it go after that? And we're also tracking another potential storm over towards the Northern Caribbean islands as well. Let's get into it. So if we take a look at our three-dimensional satellite view of Rafael here, you can get a picture of how large this storm is. You can see right around here, that's where we're getting that explosion of showers and thunderstorms right around the center of circulation. Unfortunately, it has its eye on Jamaica here. Here is Jamaica, by the way, and it's going to track up just like this. So it is putting Jamaica right on the eastern side of the storm. Tornado action, a big concern here. We're going to have all kinds of hazards with this storm, but unfortunately, you can see the circulation of this storm is very well defined at this point. So I don't see any reason why this won't be a hurricane by this point tomorrow. So we're taking a look at the GFS here, and we'll transition over towards the European model, but I have overlaid here our track guidance and compared to our model here. So let's take a look at the GFS. It is going to be rapidly intensifying this storm a lot quicker than the European model here, and that seems to be what's happening. As you can see, we're looking at a Category 1 hurricane by about the time 1 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. So this is going to be clipping parts of western Jamaica. Most of Jamaica is going to be in the thick of it here with torrential rain, and I'll be going over those rainfall amounts momentarily, but lots of wind. We're going to be talking about wind gusts with this storm upwards of 50, 60, even some gusts as high as 70 miles per hour, so power outages are a concern as well. So after midnight especially, that's when things really get cranking here across Jamaica into the early morning hours, and then that storm winds up pretty fast up here towards 7 p.m. Look at the Cayman Islands here. This thing becoming 85-mile-an-hour winds with gusts to 105 here on the GFS. Look at this. Yeah, this has it forming an eye, and of course the GFS has curiously been going east of guidance here. You can see it's on the eastern envelope. Right towards western and central Cuba here. That's where it's going to take a big hit, potentially up towards 100-mile-an-hour winds with a gust to 120, and then it reemerges. We're going to have to watch Key West here. Some of the westernmost keys may get clipped with this, and then the GFS bringing it right up into parts of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and you can see that high pressure that was off the coast is weakened, so that's why that's happening. We're going to talk more about this system in just several minutes or so here, so bear with me on this, but here it is. The GFS has this slowly weakening and heading towards, say, the Florida Panhandle, Alabama, Mississippi, and just east of New Orleans there, so a landfall right around Mobile, Pensacola area, but look how weak it's become by that point. And we'll be going over why that could be occurring here, even as it makes it into the eastern part of the Gulf. Now, looking at the European model here, you know, it's a very similar track for the most part, the first part of it. Here it is over Jamaica as we continue through 1 p.m. on Tuesday. So there's going to be impacts, especially from midnight to noon. Midnight, Monday night, into noon on Tuesday. Now, there's still going to be impacts Tuesday afternoon as this thing starts to really wind up into a hurricane. You can see this is by, 1 p.m. But it's mainly going to be confined here to western Jamaica at that point. Still torrential rains occurring. And then you can see on the European model really deepening rapidly, going right down through the center of guidance here. Here's Havana, Cuba. The Isle of Youth is in here. And yeah, thing's going to be cranking towards the northwest as we head towards 10 a.m. on Wednesday, crossing Cuba at 4 p.m., right around 2 to 4 p.m. on Wednesday, and then reemerging here into the Gulf is a little bit weaker of a storm, 90 miles per hour here. European is right down the center of guidance, Now, you notice the high pressure that we had at the beginning that was right off the East Coast. It's way over here now. So that's going to change things up here. We do have a trough kicking in here. We'd have some troughiness up here across parts of Georgia and the Carolinas. None of these are really strong enough to pick this up towards the northeast, like the GFS is kind of indicating a more northerly track. Look what starts to happen. As that high pressure moves away from the East Coast here, we have this other high that starts to build in from the northeast here. And you can see that starts to push the system and bend it more westerly here. Cancun, it's going to be close for you on this model, to say the least here. But as we go out here in time, look at this. This bends really far to the west here towards November 9th. What does it do? It brings it up towards Texas, but in a much weaker state because this trough could actually help to push it more towards the northeast at this point. But at this stage of the game here, it's not, it's anybody's game. Anybody along the Mexican, Texas, Louisiana, all the way over to Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. That's the problem. The steering currents become extremely weak in the Gulf, so this system could pretty much head just about anywhere, although the most likely scenario is in this range right here. And before we continue with more weather coverage here on the tropics and Rafael and that second storm behind it, don't forget, if you made it this far in the video, you like it, smash that like button, everyone. It really does help. Question or comment down below. I love to read your questions or comments. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe bell notification button so you're alerted with all my future weather video updates. Let's continue. Now let's take a look at our HWRF hurricane model. These things are better in the tropics, of course. Once they get into the synoptic range, they become a little less relevant at this point. But here it is. I want to zoom in on Jamaica here. This thing is going to go right over. There's the center of circulation. So let's get some timestamps here. This is 4 a.m. So you can see it's really going to start winding up here. This is what the future, it's essentially a future radar type simulation here on our HWRF model. And look at that. That's going to be some very torrential rain. This is 1 p.m., so then it's moving towards the northwest here. You can see the western part of the island. Still some feeder bands coming in just along the south coast here. So watch out. Tornado threat's going to be running high as well since you're on the eastern portion of this storm. And then look at how it really winds up here towards the Cayman Islands. So here's, many of the Cayman Islands. It's going to be moving right through this region here. That's why the hurricane warnings and watches are in effect. And look at that. Then it starts to barrel right towards Cuba here. And this is 10 a.m. on November 6th. So getting into Wednesday morning and Wednesday afternoon. This is when it could likely become a Category 2 storm. Crossover into the Gulf here, 7 a.m. on November 7th here. And then moving up towards the west here. So looks like the HWRF hurricane model is following more in line with the European model, a more bend towards the west in time. So that's pretty interesting here. I wanted to show you the simulated satellite here, three-dimensional view of what this could look like on satellite going out. So here's Jamaica. We go through 1 a.m., 7 a.m. Here it is. Yeah, that's a lot of deep convection coming right over Jamaica here. And then right up through the Cayman Islands, look at the explosion of showers and thunderstorms. 7 p.m., we're still going to be dealing with those easterly feeder bands on the southeast side here of Jamaica, all the way through the island, for that matter. So you watch out, tornado threats running high. But look at this. This explodes into a Category 2. On the other side of the Cayman Islands towards Cuba here, unleashing a tremendous amount of, surge, rain, and wind. And then it gets into the eastern Gulf here, and it still looks very formidable. A big ball of convection. Some of these eastern feeder bands could clip, southeast Florida here. So watch out. This still will be a hurricane by this point. So the western Florida Keys here as well. And then have to watch out for some impacts potentially. And then as we get into, here it is, on November 8th at 1 a.m. here, still holding on to hurricane status, and it still looks pretty formidable. And then you can start to see the center become exposed here on the west side. So it's going to be holding on at this point, November 9th here. That's when the dry air and the wind shear really start to get to it. So we're going to have to watch this. Yeah, here it is. You can see the low-level circulation over here displaced from all of the deep convection on the east side. Taking a look at the intensity forecast models here for Rafael, yeah, most agree that this is going to make it to Category 1. Now, there are some that are making it to Category 2, and I'm pretty much in agreement with that now. I think this thing could really overshoot. There is a small window this could become a 3. So let's put that out there. Definitely a Category 2 in the next day or two, and then potentially maybe pushing 3. Things of tropical tidbits here for our mid-layer, dry air, and moist air analysis here. So here's Rafael here on our GFS model. You can see right across the western part of Jamaica there. Plenty of moisture surging well up ahead of it into the eastern Gulf, getting Florida in on the act here Wednesday into Thursday. Look at that. Still a hurricane in the eastern Gulf here. And then it starts to weaken. You can see this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. It shows up here pretty perfectly here on the mid-layer dry air analysis. All this brown area is dry air, and that's a killer for these storms. And just go out here a little bit more in time. You can see there it is, making landfall, but is a much weaker storm, a tropical storm at that point. Now, look at our other storm behind it here. This storm starts to get cranking here November 6th, so this is Wednesday into Thursday. There it is, pinwheeling towards the west into Friday here. And then right across the Turks Caicos, here are the Bahamas, and then right into South Florida here in the Keys. But it does look like a pretty weak storm. It's got a lot of dry air. It's got to overcome, and eventually some wind shear here. And then look at this. Towards November 11th, dry air overtakes much of the Gulf. But there is that next potential for a storm developing. There it is, the GFS doing its GFS thing there. That's pretty crazy, but we'll have to keep an eye on it here. So if we look at our GFS run here, or actually our European run, we just did our GFS run. Here across the Western and Central Caribbean, there is our European run, taking it right up towards the western part of Cuba. So right here, pretty much the similar track to the GFS, just a little bit weaker. European usually is weaker on these storms, but there it is. Plenty of moisture, moist air feeding up here into Florida. But watch this. Here's the fundamental difference here. We have that high pressure building further northeast and then westward here. And yeah, it looks like a pretty formidable storm, but look at the European takes it pretty far west into that dry air. It's still trying to hold on to plenty of moisture, which could provide Cancun, northern Yucatan Peninsula here with plenty of rain. But look at that. It heads up towards Texas in a much weaker format here as this trough kicks to the east. It is a weakening trough, so it's going to be interesting if it can pick it up fully if this scenario does play out. And the other thing I wanted to show you here was the European run on this wind shear. So it has a good trajectory of little to no wind shear here across the Caribbean. It doesn't start to get into this wind shear development until, this is Friday, November 8th here, at least on the European run. It does evade. It doesn't manage to evade on the southern and eastern side, obviously, but the northern side and western side here will be getting wind shear. Let's take a look at the GFS. So looking at our GFS here for wind shear, it's got a really good shot here without any wind shear until you get, this is pretty remarkable this time of year. It's not going to get significant wind shear here on the GFS until you got to go into Thursday, November 7th here. This is when it starts to lose its hurricane characteristics on the GFS. And then Friday, November 8th here. So that's when the wind shear will really start to erode it along with the dry air. So I wanted to show you the difference in steering currents here, upper level vorticity here on the GFS model. Obviously, you have this very strong area of high pressure off the U.S. East Coast, the Carolina coastline here out towards Bermuda, and that's going to keep it on this course here according to the GFS. Now, they see this trough up here. That is the key on the GFS as we head towards Thursday into Friday here. You start to see it bends a little bit towards the westward here, as we get a little bit of a push here from an easterly high pressure building in. But watch what happens here. This big trough over Texas that's causing all that severe weather helps pull this up to the north and then combines forces. And unfortunately, look where it's pushing it, right into areas that saw tremendous rainfall here from Hurricane Helene here. So that's not what we need. And there's that other storm behind it. You can see it kicking into the eastern Gulf here next Monday, November 11th here. And then we got that next potential here system trying to cyclonically spin up here. Look at that. Yeah, we're going to have to keep a close eye on this. It's still pretty far out, though, so take that with a grain of salt. And if we look at our European run here, there's Rafael heading right to the western tip of Jamaica there as we head into Tuesday, right through the Cayman Islands here into Wednesday, merging into the Gulf on Thursday. You can see the steering currents are much weaker on the European model. There's the trough is way back here across western Texas. The flow is kind of pretty well variable here. I mean, there is an easterly component here. You can see high pressure way off the screen here building in from the north, and that does help to push the system more west and in some cases west-southwest here according to the European model. You can see that high pressure really does start to build in here Sunday, November 10th. So that helps push it more westerly here until we get that trough here on November 10th. You see it up to the north. It starts to pull it up here towards Texas. So if we take a look at rainfall amounts here, I'm a little concerned here on our GFS showing a lot of rainfall being pulled north here. We do have that, that trough, that boundary that's helping to pull a little bit up to the north. And you can see, look at what's happening here. 2 to 4 inch amounts here into the red, but these yellows and oranges is what I'm really concerned about. That's where we're getting into the 4 to 8 inch plus. And it does help to pull it up a little bit farther to the north towards eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina, where we really don't need more rain at the moment, definitely at this point. And if we look at our European run, it's not much better here. The only good thing is it's a little bit further to the south and to the east. It's still bringing Georgia and South Carolina those 3 to 6 inch plus amounts here. And if we look at the Caribbean here, if we look at our rainfall totals, yeah, Jamaica up through the Cayman Islands, 100 to as much as 200 millimeters of rainfall here. I'm looking at solid 4 to 8 inch amounts. Some areas could see upwards of a foot of rain. This is not looking like a good scenario. This is going to bring tremendous rainfall totals here across the western and central Caribbean here from Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, up through Cuba, and then eventually here into the eastern Gulf. And if we look at the Caribbean here, if we look at our rainfall totals, yeah, Jamaica up through the Cayman Islands, 100 to as much as 200 millimeters of rainfall here. I'm looking at solid 4 to 8 inch amounts. Some areas could see upwards of a foot of rain. This is not looking like a good scenario. This is going to bring tremendous rainfall totals here across the western and central Caribbean here from Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, up through Cuba, and then eventually here into the eastern Gulf. All right, so we're looking at our other system over here across the northern Caribbean islands here. So there's going to be a potential for an area of low pressure developing here just north of the Leeward Islands. That's something we're going to watch over the next several days. It's something that is not going to develop quite rapidly, but here it is on November 7th into the 8th. You can see it on the European run. It has a chance to develop. European model keeping it weaker, which is hugging the islands here from the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. So this is right around November 8th. And as we continue here, you can see that pushes towards the Turks and the Caicos here in the southeastern Bahamas. And then the 9th into the 10th, more towards the Florida Keys and the rest of the Bahamas here. Plenty of moisture to be had. So this has the potential to develop into something. At this stage of the game, we have plenty of time to watch it, being that it's almost a week out. But there it is, emerging into South Florida here. This is November 12th, so this is something that may potentially impact South Florida here as we go out into the second week of November. So there it is, and lots of activity here. It kind of gets lost in the shuffle, so to speak, here. Let's see if we can just back that up just a little bit. There it is. It looks like it's getting entrained into this East Coast trough that's hanging out off the East Coast into the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So looking at our GFS model here on our potential Northern Caribbean island system as we continue through, there it is. It's showing up pretty good here. Let me just stop it right here. So this is the beginning of it. This is right around November 6th. So we can already see it picking up here on Wednesday across the Virgin Islands and then towards Puerto Rico here as we head on into Thursday, the 7th, into Friday, the 8th here, picking up just north of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, right through the Turks and Caicos here. And then there you can see it closing off just southeast of South Florida here. Looks a little less impressive here on the GFS than it did on the European model, but there it is entering the eastern Gulf of Mexico right across South Florida. And then it kind of gets washed out in this trough action, so to speak, here. So wind shear, dry air may be at play here. And before we continue with more weather, check out these awesome, amazing maps that you won't find anywhere else.
I am proud to announce that I am now an affiliate with Trilogy Maps. TrilogyMaps.com, bringing you the most digital, customizable maps found nowhere else on the internet. These maps are simply stunning. It's an advanced layering system that makes these maps great for making forecast maps with ease or any other maps that you would like to display important information on. The resolution on these maps is simply amazing. From the detail of everything here in the States, and you can also create stunning, digital, professional layered maps from also across the entire world. And don't forget, in checkout, the discount code option, use my code, MeteoMark, hit apply, and you will get 20% off your order. So if you want the most professional, customizable, and affordable weather maps found nowhere else on the internet, look no further than TrilogyMaps.com. Link in the description down below along with your discount code.
Thank you for joining me for this special coverage on Rafael. We're going to be covering this storm throughout the week. I hope everybody stays safe in Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, up through Cuba, and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico. Don't forget, you can always visit me on my Facebook page at MeteoMark, also Weather Northeastern, also at Hurricane Northeastern, Twitter at Weather Eastern. Don't forget MeteoMark.com, and don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button, question or comment down below. Thanks, everyone.